Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next class seminar. Today we'll learn all about viruses and what they are up to. We have with us Hables Gray, normally from California, but now stationing in Europe already for a while. Chris is an author and a scholar, also a gardener, and an activist, and also a teacher.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I want to thank CLEA for having me here. I went to this amazing conference in February, Systems at Play, and found out about this whole network of people I didn't know existed, which works in very similar ways to my networks. So it was a very fortuitous discovery. This is a talk about a book I just wrote, which is still looking for a publisher because the publisher I had made the mistake of showing it to their sales department and didn't like it before even getting it reviewed. So I won't name their name here, but I hate them. So I'm optimistic though. I have several publishers and even an agent looking at it. I'm sure it'll get published one way or another, even if I have to do it myself. And I'm not advancing, even though I tested it. Oh, you're so smart. You told me that. Thanks so much. Marta has once again demonstrated her technological superiority. So I'm going to start very briefly with a story about someone named Stephanie. I put into Google social media, infection, COVID kills. And I found a number of stories. This was the most moving, with this woman who had been living a very good life, but then she had, her partner died and she hit 75. She couldn't play tennis anymore. And she got sucked into watching videos first about COVID and conspiracies, and then going on social media, and ended up a full believer that COVID was a plot to manipulate people and take control of them, refused medications once she got sick, and went into the hospital and died. And for her family, as it says here in the headline from this NPR article, they feel the conspiracy theories killed her, not so much the virus. And if you look at her medical trajectory, where she was taking horse tranquilizer instead of what the doctors wanted her to, and refused to go on respiration and so on. It's a strong argument. And the argument is the same as my book, that in fact, all these different viral phenomena, specifically the biological that we know so well, and the pandemic we aren't really totally out of yet, as well as the cultural, the spreading of ideas, especially as accelerated by the digital. All of these are viral phenomena on a deep level, not a superficial level, not just rhetorically. That's the argument I'm trying to make here. It symbolizes by these masks I got in Venice, the digital, the biological, and the cultural, the three realms. You have the steampunk mask, you have the traditional Doctor de Peste, the doctor from the plague, and a mask that I got blank, and I've modified with images from the scientists on what SARS-CoV-2 looks like, which is surprisingly colorful and different, showing how flexible scientists can be when they represent what they're thinking about. And then my book title, and it may change still, I have Facebook down as a marker for the digital. But of course, in the last 3 or 4 months, we've seen an explosion of what people call massive machine learning or algorithmic intelligence, or for a while, people were calling it stupid AI, including me. But now my friend Angel Gordo and I want to call it algorithmic intelligence. Also, I call it in my book, viral AI. These kind of massive machine learning programs depend on iterations, viral reproductions, and those that are successful sort of survive. It's extremely similar to how biological viruses propagate. So it seemed to me a good connection to make. And I might throw that in. To the title, I haven't decided. I was very familiar with these programs. They come out of expert systems and also some other currents of AI research that have been long ongoing, but that they recently broke through and have proven so disturbing to so many commentators. It makes it a good example for people to see. Of course, Facebook and the other social media companies, they have their success comes from earlier iterations of these kind of programs. as ways of finding out how to be stickier for people, which includes often giving them very negative information and stuff that makes them afraid or angry. Turns out it's much stickier to make them afraid or angry than it is to make them happy and brave. So I'm just giving you a quick outline. I'll show you the table of contents of the book. Then I will speak specifically on a couple of the key dynamics that underlie my understanding of why virus can be seen as a language. And after that, I'll look at grammar and vocabulary of the language virus, and then a typical ending of claiming this is very important and you must pay attention. So here's the book's outline. It's written, it's sort of weird. I've never written a book and not had a publisher before. So I'm sort of surprised by how that feels. But it goes through intermixing my personal experiences of the pandemic and other viral type of things in my life as an activist, organizing large-scale movements, seeing ideas spread through society, noticing all those things, with a look at the similarities, the deep similarities of these three types of viral phenomena. And you find many, many people in different disciplines understand the world in viral ways. There's a whole subsection of anthropology that analyzes culture as viral only. And of course, you see this in many other places too, not just in biology. You see it a lot in studies of the digital realm, because digitality allows us to track specific ideas and see how they spread through different social media, and notice how some spread incredibly quickly and others not so much. They die out. And this is all very similar to the way biological viruses are tracked. And there's many books actually that argue that biological, cultural, and digital viral phenomena are similar. These are more written from a scientific perspective. And sometimes they make arguments, though, that are not correct. Like one book was making an argument that biological phenomena is different than digital because you can't tell where a digital idea that's propagated through social media starts. But actually, people like Starbird up at University of Washington and others who study the spread of digital ideas, they actually can say this is where it started. And sometimes it starts in St. Petersburg with the mill that produces Russian propaganda, and sometimes it starts other places. But not that we can tell where everyone starts. It's the same with biological viruses. We're still debating where those start. Well, I came to this idea that virus is a language on its own because I've long used discourse analysis. When I wrote my first book, Postmodern War, which is free online at this address to download, I used the discourse analysis. I looked at war as a discourse system. And I drew on the history of consciousness Board of Studies at the University of California at Santa Cruz. And there I was taught hermeneutics, poetics, rhetoric, the work of Northrop Frye, Gadamer's hermeneutic philosopher, by Hayden White especially, and my mentor Donna Haraway, right? Now, much to my surprise, I discovered that the people here have also done a lot of important work on discourse analysis, drawing on a completely different set of people, including several I'm not really fond of, like the philosopher Ayer. But nonetheless, the conclusions they reach are very similar. Although I have to say this article goes deeper into some of the interesting subject-object distinctions than I do. I just used it as a tool in analyzing war. It's very helpful to understand war because war is not a logical thing, very emotional. Feminist philosophers like Elaine Scarry, who wrote The Body in Pain, but also Susan Mansfield, who wrote a great book on the gestalts of war. Barbara Ehrenreich wrote about the origins of war and blood rights. But as well, many people who've experienced war, some women, but also men like John Gray, who wrote The Warriors, Robert Graves, the poet, John Fussell wrote a brilliant book on the experience of war. We try to understand how war is shaped and how it changes. I just put all this up here. You shouldn't try to read it. It's almost more like a graphic, but it goes through these claims that war is a discourse system, not just the words, and it has rules and meta rules. I drew a lot on Foucault when he talked about knowledges and subjugated knowledges. Now, a rule is something that will apply to a specific war, like men fight wars is a rule. A meta rule is that wars are patriarchal. So in fact, you have many women now in combat roles. In Kurdistan, the Rahova people, the YPG units, there's whole units of women fighting. The US military has many women in combat, the Israelis do, and so on. So how can this be if war is patriarchal? Well, when women are in war, they are re-inscribed as men. And my book goes into how this happens. So it's still, the meta rules apply, but the rules change. So discourse analysis was very helpful for me understanding war, and I use it in my work understanding the role of cyborgs, the politics of cyborgs, my book, Cyborg Citizen, several collections I've been part of, the Cyborg Handbook, Modified Living as a Cyborg, those two books too. And then I looked at postmodern war. I have a whole argument about postmodern war based on the rules of modern war, which include the continual improvement of weapons and the use of those weapons, which goes back actually to Machiavelli in his Art of War. He argued for that. And in many respects, Sun Tzu, who wrote the very best book on war thousands of years ago, which tells you something about war theory. But of course, in postmodern war, you cannot use all the weapons you can make. You cannot use the hydrogen weapons. You cannot use a lot of the biological weapons and the chemical weapons. So this is the background, and when I started looking at the virus, Cultural Politics put out a call for papers about the pandemic. John Armitage is the brilliant editor of it. And so I've written for them before, I'm on the board. I thought, oh, I'll write about the pandemic. The more I thought about it, I saw the similarities with the digital world, which I study, and with the spread of ideas through culture, which is actually my avocation, spreading the idea that we can actually govern ourselves. We don't need these other people governing us. And I started realizing this goes even further than a discourse analysis. Now, you do not have to accept my claim that we should think of virus as a language. You could say, oh, it's a discourse system. We need to learn the code. You could say it's a dialect, maybe a Creole or Pidgin. In linguistics, they talk about bridge languages, lingua francas, which is like a language used for trade. Certain languages came out of this traffic, Swahili, and some people argue Catalan. So it might just be, as we say in the computer world, a heuristic, a tool for thinking about it. But maybe it's more than that. I think for us to truly understand some of the implications of these viral phenomena that are driving our postmodern world, not just the biological viruses, but digital and cultural, we really need to work as hard as we do learning another language. And I mean, work as hard as I do learning another language, not some of the people who I really despise who learn other languages like that. I've been trying to learn Spanish my whole life, and I'm only half good at it. So that's where we are. I'm going to talk about, well, it should have been another one. Right? I'm going to talk about two things: networks, systems. Oh yeah, I said that already, and discourse. So for me also, everything's systems, everything's networks. You know, as the thing about the turtles goes, it's networks all the way down. And if you see how networks are constructed, we construct them. We say this is a system. I talk to my students about that, and I say, well, your body is a system of all these different organs, and each organ is a system of all these different cells, and each cell is a system. So it's all the way down and all the way up to the universe, and maybe even multiple universes. The people here at CLEA have done a lot of work on, in fact, I guess it's part of their language they speak, cybernetics. This is what cybernetics is about. The flows of information, energy, and matter within systems, and all the different ways that happens. Of course, feedback and its many variations, as Norbert Wiener pointed out, is crucial. But if you want a quick introduction to cybernetics, several people have asked me out of the Systems of Play conference, well, what is this cybernetics? And so I point them to this article. I can't imagine, I haven't read a better one. It's very straightforward. It's for an encyclopedia, very useful. So now I'm going to go quick and dirty, as Donna Haraway used to say, through viral grammar, but I will spend particular emphasis on exponentials, for which I have a lot of very disturbing graphs, and the problem of percentages. Two of the things that convinced me that we need to speak virus as a language is the great difficulty almost everyone has coming to terms with percentages, how they work, and with exponentials. Percentages is how viruses work. No one if one person catches a virus, gets an idea, the computer gets sick, this does not prove anything particular about the general behavior, the general spread of that virus. You need to know more. As with SARS-CoV-2, which produces the disease of COVID, you need to know how many people are getting sick and at what rate of spread and under what conditions. And it's percentages. But people, for whatever reason, and I blame evolution, are not good at understanding percentages. They will take their own personal experience or their grandmother's, and they will read way too much into it. So that's just one example of how people think in bad ways, which is not helped by our normal use of language. And the other is very much is exponential, which I'll get to in a second. Here I have a bunch of different principles that I call viral grammar principles. You can see viruses are infection through information, because actually, that's what a biological virus is. When you start looking closely at it, it's a little packet of information which tells other biological mechanisms that are part of the virus how to take over the cell and reproduce itself. It's really one of the most purest forms of information that some people claim is alive. This is a fun thing I talk about in the book. The fight scientists have over whether or not viruses are alive, but they do not agree on that. The viruses evolve. This is very important. The whole world is constantly evolving on many different levels. And a lot of people just do not accept this. And that is why you need to learn to speak virus, or at least understand that. It goes on through other things like this. Humans are the viral measurers, because of course, we're the ones who define the systems. We're the ones who write these books. We're the ones who care about these things, and etc. There's a different viral time, which in my book I go into. It's both an acceleration and a deacceleration. It's separate from the human live time that we experience with our watches and stuff. All models of viruses are wrong. Well, all models are wrong, but that doesn't mean they're not really important tools. But we need to understand that there's always a gap between a model and the reality. And if we fall in love with our models too much, that's when it becomes dangerous. As long as we remember their models. If you go back to that mask from Venice with all my different images of scientific versions of what the virus looks like, SARS-CoV-2, those are all models. And they choose the colors for different reasons and the way it looks, and they all have their uses, and they're all different, and they're all wrong. For one thing, they aren't three-dimensional, right? Viruses are cyborgs. Of course, they do a lot of work on cyborgs. Viruses do not have agency. That doesn't mean agency can't come out of massive collective behavior of all sorts of systems. But viruses themselves, and the way people in public, especially journalists, talk about viruses, it's been very dangerous. Oh, SARS-2 wants you not to wear a mask, right? I've got dozens of articles that say how the actual viral particle has desires about our behavior. Not very true. The whole idea of going to war with a virus is madness. And of course, this is a mistake. It's a categorical mistake, because we need viruses to live. There are many good viruses. Actually, I have to admit, while I was writing this book, I did not realize how many viruses are basic for human existence. And there's an incredible number of them. So for us to go to war with viruses because this one virus is killing some millions of us, it's nonsense and a misattribution of agency, among other things. And viruses must spread. That's how they exist. They don't spread. And if they don't evolve, and if they don't propagate, the more they propagate, the more they evolve, the further they can spread. These are all related. So now I'm going to talk about exponentials, which for a while has been one of the main problems of human cognition, of human understanding, both on individual and social levels. And for me, thinking of virus as a language has really helped with this. Here we see the crisis that the world is in, with exponentials about the lethality of weapons. This is when I first started noticing them, of course. And even I was little, I knew about human population going up. But when you look at the lethality of weapons, which are two of these charts, when you look at the global temperature, when you look at, what is this one here? Oh, average annual wealth. We see two charts of extinctions on wealth. We see extinctions for the sixth great extinction, and we see plastic in the environment. All of these are going up at an extraordinary rate, an unsustainable rate. This is the crisis we are in. I always tell my students, you are right here, and I point to the very top. to get them to understand that they are living in extraordinary times. I've tried to point this out to historians who actually, as a group, because I've been interdisciplinary, I've had appointments in history and stuff. As a group, they are very resistant. They go, oh, everyone's always predicting the end of the world, blah, blah, blah. And I said, did they have hydrogen weapons? Rome fell, sure. They didn't have hydrogen weapons. That's quite different. Of course, many things in biology have exponential growth. SARS, for example, here we show human population growth again, linked to the extinction of species. I've started putting in the history of technology in here, because that's biological in a sense too. It's a categorical mistake to separate humans and what we do from nature. So I throw that into, and just to show in these different ways how in fact the world is accelerating. And what's accelerating the acceleration is the digital. When you look at the uptake of new technologies, digital technologies, the power of digital technologies, Moore's law, the famous doubling every 14 months of the power of the CPU, which last time I checked was every 12.7 months. Storage capability, RAM, they're increasing even faster. This is why we can have viral AI. This is why we have massive machine learning. The programming hasn't gotten any better. Many people argue the programming's gotten worse, but people have more room to program. The machines are faster and quicker because the hardware and the software is better. And we're seeing this incredible growth in the power of the digital. And it's not all bad. I mean, it can drive good things. It can drive the development of the vaccine so quickly, which I should have put in here now that I think about it. When the pandemic first hit, when COVID started appearing, everyone said, oh, it'll be 4 or 6 years before we get a vaccine. Not everyone, actually, because some of us said, no, they're going to have vaccines really fast. The CRISPR technology, the digital framework that allows for all sorts of biological manipulations. The fact that Bill Gates started funding factories, different factories for different research lines, so that when the right research line was successful, the factory would be ready. All these things meant that we would get vaccines much quicker than we ever have before. And this will continue. This is one of the good things of this exponential. We see the spread of women's power. We see the spread of sexual freedom. We see the increase in literacy. These two follow in general exponential curves. We see here in the bottom left chart from Pinker's argument about our better angels of a decline in violence. There's definitely been a decline in violence on the interpersonal level, all across cultures. He makes an argument too, there's been a decline in violence militarily in wars, not in absolute numbers of people killed in wars, although actually the peak levels of World War II have yet to be reached. But that argument's a lot weaker. One nuclear war, and that argument disappeared. And we could have a nuclear war at any moment. But there's a hope in these exponentials that I often don't give enough importance to. That in fact, as fast as stupid ideas, dangerous ideas can spread through society, really good ideas can spread through society. And I've seen it in my life, politically, feminism, anarchism, a decline of all sorts of authoritarian, pseudo-rationalistic forms of social change. They've all collapsed, and we've seen much more open, flexible ideas, sexual liberation ideas spread much more quickly through society than anyone would have predicted. And that's a cause for hope. And there's another cause for hope I don't want to forget to mention. I was lecturing to a class of photography students in the Netherlands virtually, and I gave all the bad news. And I said, you people are doomed. Your generation will be the first generation in Europe and North America poorer than the other generations. And one student, I later learned, was a Syrian refugee. She was saying, well, no, that can't be all the bad news. I mean, there's got to be good news. There's got to be hope. And I thought a lot, and then she kept arguing with me, and I realized she was right. And actually, then what I said gave her hope, because what I said was, yes, it's true, your generation is in a very bad state, but the good news is you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice on whether or not you are going to try to change the world for the better. My generation, even, although I've seen this coming since I was little, I'm not surprised by anything that's happened pretty much since I was like 5. But for most of my generation, no, it's like, oh, things will get better. It's not getting bad so fast. But the current generation of younger people, and I know some young people will eventually see this, you don't have a choice. If you don't join with the older people who've been trying to make the world something more sustainable and just, then it's over. We are at the point where we have to spread a more rational way of living with complexity. This is one of the themes of the people, who are sponsoring this talk, and it's so true. We have to learn to live with this complexity and to change it, to control it. And one could say ride it if you're thinking like a cowboy, or we'll just shit out of luck. Sorry for the profanity. So then I talked about viral vocabulary. One of the powers of talking about viruses and language is you can take a term from one viral realm, like the biological, and apply it to the digital and apply it to the cultural. And it often, turns out to be very useful. Not always, but really, and vocabulary can change within a language, of course, but many of these terms are very useful, like variant, that applies to, this is actually how social media companies first started using massive machine learning. They would make different ads, different variants, and see which ones, got the most hits. They would manipulate different aspects of the feed of Facebook, actually often doing this illegally, and see how the different variants performed. That's how they found out that fear and hate were stickier, were better for Facebook than bravery and love. So they, of course, tweaked the algorithms to maximize fear and hate. And that, of course, fed into our current situation where a lot of really crazy, fearful, hateful ideas are spreading quicker. They spread because they make somebody money and because they're stickier too. And so all of these things, reproduction rate, most of these are from the biological, but not all. Protocol is actually a digital term. Affordances comes from design and so on. But they all are part of what you could call a viral vocabulary and apply to different viral realms. At the very beginning, the first slide had my email and the last slide has my email. Anyone can write me and I will send you one chapter from the book and the table of contents. I won't send you any more because then I'll probably have trouble selling it, but I will do that. Now there's 4 terms from the vocabulary that are particularly important, and that's hosts, vectors, catalysts, and controls. All viral phenomena have these. A virus has to be hosted. Biological virus is hosted in an organic feature of some sort, of organic system. A digital virus must be in a computer, in a machine. A cultural virus must be within a culture. I mean, they don't exist on their own. They can go quiescent. A biological virus can be a viral, or even an idea could just be in a lost book until it's rediscovered, and then it becomes active because it has an active host. There's aspects of being a host. The populations, different contagions spread in different ways through the host. To understand viral phenomena, you have to really pay attention to the different types of hosts, whatever the virus is. And it's the same with vectors. Vectors, from mathematics, are lines with direction that go in different places. People use vector mathematics to analyze viral spread. I mean, in a concrete mathematical way, both in epidemiology, but also in the digital realm in particular. It gets much harder with culture. Culture is the harder viral realm. It's much clearer in the digital and the biological how viruses propagate and so on than it is in the cultural. But yet it still remains true. Mackenzie Wark has even made this interesting argument, which I disagree with. I think Shoshana Zuboff's surveillance capitalism gets more to the heart of the current dominant political economy. But he argues that what we have now is vector capitalism. And you can just see this idea of the vectors is a potent way of analyzing how society works, especially in how the digital has become so powerful economically, right? Catalysts, of course, are crucial for all 3 of these different realms. Different things speed up, maximize the spread of the viral. And then, of course, controls or antivirals, you would say in the biological realm, is the opposite of that. Certain things can tamp down the spread of viral ideas. We see this with attempts on the social media companies to ban certain sites, for example, or certain keywords are hunted out and prescribed and so on. It's a way of controlling the spread in digital realm. We see this in Greece. They just banned the New Dawn movement, which is a far-right party. So they're trying to keep the ideas of far-right fascism from spreading in Greek culture by prescribing new dawn. It's a control, an attempt to control it. Of course, you get control rods and radioactive phenomena. You're trying to keep control of the radioactive processes that can lead either to nuclear explosions or nuclear power and so on. So this is just to show that all these things sort of interrelate in an interesting way. Another thing I point out in this book, and I've been pointing it out for a while, is that there is no such thing as normal. After a far-right terrorist, probably with several accomplices who never was caught, blew up the US government building in Oklahoma City, then after that, then the reporters a few years later, they went to Oklahoma City and they said, yeah, what's it like now? Is it like it was before? Is it normal? Is it normal again? And some of the people said, no, it's not normal again. I mean, they killed over 200 people, including many children, right? They blew up the daycare center, among other parts of the building. And so then the reporter said, oh, it's a new normal. It's the new normal. And for a while, there was an attempt in the United States where my place is from. I'm a Californian. I don't like saying I'm from the United States. That's where I live. It's common in the United States after 9/11. Then, oh, this is the new normal. We're in terroristic war. Although I had argued even earlier that no, postmodern war includes that kind of state of constant war anyway. So no, this is how it is. There's no normal. There's no new normal. It's continual abnormal. This is part of what the exponential drivers are doing to human society. When my grandparents were young, they did not live in a stable, normal world. I remember talking to my father's father, who was a machinist, who grew up, his father was a train engineer, so he was very familiar with new technologies. He could do anything you could imagine with an old car and fix it up. And yet he was just amazed that when he was young, most people in his community in Nebraska still rode horses. And by the time he died, people had gone to the moon. Now, is this normal? What part of his life was normal? 2 world wars, real world wars for the whole globe happened in his lifespan. There is no more normal, as David Graeber points out. And yet, it's this attempt to make us think, oh, we can get back to the normal, is part of the way we are kept from confronting just how fundamental the crisis we are in is. We are in an extremely deep crisis, and it's coming quicker all the time. There are more scientists and engineers alive right now than there have been in the rest of history combined. Think about that. Think of all the great inventors and developers from, the woman Zog who figured out how plants grow, and Log and Bog who figured out that, oh, the grain ferments and you can get drunk off the beer. And then fire was controlled before that. Up until we had actually science, so we're from the 1700s, and engineering and so on. And all of those people, every great innovator we know about and all those we don't, all together less than those we have now. And the ones we have now have better technology and have access to all that earlier knowledge. It's only getting faster. It's only speeding up. And yet some people politically on the right and the left think the solution is to accelerate everything. Now, I'm a revolutionary, but I don't think we need to accelerate the crises, whether from the left or the right, so things can become clearer. This was the idea behind the attempt to storm the Capitol, but many, of my compañeros, many of my comrades, anarchists and so on, think, oh, we should accelerate. The Marxists would say, heighten the contradictions. I don't think we need to do that. We need all the time we can get. So what we can do is learn to think about complexity, learn to teach people how to survive and think about complexity, how to hold many different ideas in their minds together and translate between them. As I refer to here, Swahili, Catalan, and the 4 great lingua francas of our society today. Of course, English is spoken by every scientist to some degree and many others. But people should realize Spanish is a language that many different people have as their second language, especially indigenous people in the New World, so-called New World, just as old as the Old World. And Arabic is also a lingua franca that people speak all over. And China and places near China, which is very multi-ethnic ethnic, many different peoples. They often have Mandarin or the official forms of Chinese as their second language. So you can all learn virus as a language because it's not nearly as complicated as any of those or any of the others, because it's not a real language, but perhaps it's something that you should work on trying to understand so that you can not just know on a superficial level, but really understand in your heart things like exponential change, percentages, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I just want to say again how amazing it is that this is what CLEA does as well. So I found all these people who were doing work like my old networks, and yet here they are hidden in Brussels of all places, where I've never been before, but it turns out to be a very nice city. So that's a lot of nice discoveries. So here's my email. I always answer emails when people write me. And here's what I'm working on now. I'm writing a book with my friend Angel Gordo on prefigurative AI as a framework for thinking of how we can control this massive AI, not by waving our arms and saying ethics, ethics, or by some appeal to democracy when yet no one could agree with what democracy is. Better, Angel and I say, is we think, what kind of world do we want? And then let's have AI right now like that. When you make social change, if you pretend the ends and the means are divorced, oh, we want a non-violent world, but we will kill a lot of people to get it. Well, you know what? That has never worked out. We want a feminist world, but we'll let the men be in charge so we get a feminist world. You know, that doesn't happen. We believe everyone should, we should live in harmony with the environment, but right now we need to have our nukes and burn our coal for this or that reason. No, prefiguration is necessary for any kind of fundamental change, and we think it's a good framework for talking about these new types of AI. And I'm writing a book on infoisms, different aphorisms and perspectives on information. I've already complained to my host here that they've added a lot of work to my book because there's some new things I've learned about complexity and so on from their efforts. And my next book is going to be on violence. As a nonviolence activist for many years, I believe in the minimal use of violence, but I believe this term nonviolence doesn't really capture what we often do, taking over places, smashing, trying to smash weapons, trying to stop nuclear power, trying to stop oil companies from doing what they do. So I'm trying to rethink that. And I'm writing a book on evolution, and I'm writing a book about my family's history that explains why California should be independent, that it's its own culture. So I think I've left my email up there long enough and my scary picture of me wearing my mask. So now it's time for questions, and I only used 45 minutes. I was a good boy. Let's hope there are questions or comments, of course.
Should I stop the share or?
I'll stop the share, please. Yeah.
Okay, so who wants to ask?
Well, I missed one thing in your presentation, which was what is a bias in your definition? Because it includes obviously biological biases and digital biases, but what is it more general?
Well, it would be a very small unit that doesn't have agency. That you really, I lean towards saying it's not even alive because it doesn't have the complexity necessary for being alive, but it can reproduce massively. And through the processes of massive reproduction, it interacts with its environment, its hosts, as well as the catalysts and the controls that are around and spreading through the vectors, so that it either becomes very successful, and then obviously all these viral spreads lead to collapse, because the more successful it is, the more likely it is to collapse. So it's these small particles that together can have a profound effect in any of these realms, biologically, digitally, or culturally. But it starts with that unit, and crucial is this mutation. The more viral reproduction there is, the greater the rate of mutation, which then can lead to more reproduction. And with some viruses, this could lead to a bunch of different ways. So you can draw the curves. The curves follow very similar patterns. Remember with the whole flattening the curve. Well, the flattening the curve happens when you implement controls. That's what masking was, social distancing. In the digital realm, it can be banning certain websites, trying to block, fake news sources and so on. Culturally, it could be what the Greeks are trying to do, or what Germany has done, prescribing Nazi paraphernalia. But it's still the tendency of viruses is to reproduce massively, a crucial element. And there's a simplicity to it. Now, some people have asked me, why don't I talk in terms of cultural viruses, in terms of memes? But the problem is, one problem is, the whole younger generation just thinks of memes as grumpy cats. Memes are little pictures. So that first, you have to get past that. But Dawkins' original idea of the meme, he sort of let it get loose. And in fact, a meme can be Catholicism, or a meme could be a grumpy cat. And a meme sounds a lot like gene, but do they act like genes? Really, the memes act more like viruses. That's one of my complaints about memes. They don't act like genes. Genes are not viruses. Genes are influenced by viruses, but they act quite differently, the way they mix information, the way they propagate through time. And yet viruses is what like grumpy cats do. They get everywhere and then they go away, right? So that's why I don't use the term meme. I prefer to think of certain ideas in culture, changes in culture, especially simpler ones that spread very quickly. And I draw a lot on the cultural anthropologists who talk about viral culture. And they look at things smaller. They actually started looking at religion, but they look at key elements of how religion propagates, ancestor worship, or the pharaoh how a certain person in the religion, the pharaoh or Jesus, becomes representative for a whole process, like the sacrifice, or for the immortality, that the pharaoh's immortality was supposed to help everyone in some sense have access to immortality. The sacrifice of Jesus was now the sacrifice that used to be spread out, maybe to many animals and ancient pagans, and often humans were sacrificed in both Mesoamerica and in Eurasia and in Africa. So let's hope that helps.
I was going to ask about the memes, so you already anticipated my question.
I notice you don't use the term memes in your work, do you?
I do.
France
I have written a lot about memes before it became independent sense. And one of my articles, a short summary of my theory of meme spread, is one of my most cited papers, probably because memes have become quite popular recently. Because it only became popular in citations 10 or 20 years after I wrote it.
Oh, that's interesting. And it takes this more broad view of the meme.
Yes, well, it speaks specifically about the meme transmission process, which I saw in 4 stages. First, the meme must be somewhere in a mind where it must survive. That means it should not be something you immediately forget. Second, it should be possible to express it in language. Third, you should be motivated to express it in language. And fourth, somebody who encounters your expression in language or some other medium should be able to interiorize it again. So you have 4 stages that it needs to pass to. And if it fails at one of these stages, well, then it's not a good meme. Then it won't.
See, that I would have found very useful. But like Susan Blackmore, is it? And, she's tried very hard to make memes explain everything. And I read her book and I was just going, I don't think this is going to work. And even Dawkins was not very careful. It wasn't precise.
For me, this notion of a meme was never really very convincing. But mostly because to my mind, it's completely like a hypothetical unit, so you this thinking in terms of, and when you work with any social phenomenon, you have to invent those closures. Like, what is this unit? Because it's never working. That you can never make it so crispy as it is crispy in the theoretical. When you have a meme as an object, okay, but try to put it with reality, and you always make so arbitrary decision what comes into a meme, yes, as a unit, that I was never really.
The same applies to the cultural bias. In the digital case, there it's easy. You have a message on Facebook, you click share, and it's exactly the same message that appears on your friends' pages.
True, but in my understanding, when I was listening to you, putting the speaking in terms of virus is kind of bringing forth the dynamism of spreading rather than like, like the meme, because of this like kind of ontological thing is like, like you imagine it more like a cell. So you want to know what's the content of it, and virus is basically like mostly the spreading, and like
more about the virus.
And the unit, as you say, is like unit is like stupid and doesn't want anything, so it's like mostly the dynamics.
But then we need another term to distinguish between biological viruses and other viruses.
Yeah.
So you could, I mean, one of the terms that people have been using as an alternative for me was mind virus. Or in this case, we would rather speak about cultural viruses, because mind viruses that imply that most of the work stays in your mind, while if it goes via Facebook, people often hardly read or understand what the thing is, and they just replicate.
Well, in my book, I'm very careful to always say biological virus or all viruses or digital virus.
So the types.
Info virus has been used.
But to come back to the question of the definition, I would suggest, kind of like to flesh out, like from what you say, what is like in my understanding a definition of the virus in this sense. I think like I wouldn't really describe the unit, yes, because for example, when you have a multicellular organism, you can also say that the small units are not really like that smart, and they don't have like intention or whatever it is. But the huge difference, I think, is on the what is the top level, the logic of the top level dynamics, yes. And here is a very clear difference, because in viral phenomena is a positive feedback, yeah, and in organisms as us, the top level is the negative feedback, is a closure, yeah, and you have like not me, and also like our natural languages are exactly this bounding and separating and making dialectics and kind of stopping here, yes. So to understand the word, you have to one notion. You need to understand where it ends, yes. So it's like the top logic is the closure and differentiation, and with the virus it would seem that the top logic is like going everywhere, so in that sense I like if I understand you correctly, it's not our natural language, because we are like differently composed organisms.
Exactly. I actually want to write this down, but I'll remember it because it's very insightful. And that'll help me explain it, why I think this is important, because it's a dynamic that goes against how natural languages work and how we work.
So we are not like that, and our natural languages are not like that.
No, they aren't. But we live in a world that's being shaped by this kind of force, even things we made, like the digital, and the way the biological viruses spread. There's a line, cholera walked, and COVID flew by planes. I mean, the way the biological viruses spread now, it's just been accelerated. And that's what they want to do, just like you said. That's very good, and that's very helpful.
I just kind of want to go over a quick conceptual definition real quick, because I came a little late. When you guys are talking about meme, can you just kind of explain a little more exactly what a meme could be? Like, is it a word, or is it kind of I don't know.
Well, Francis wrote a paper that very much defined memes in a helpful way, but it went against what some of the main people in memetics, they call it, want to do with the word. So,
well, a meme is a cultural item, but of course, what's an item or what's a unit? And cultural item means that it is shared between people, which means it's in the mind of one person, it's somehow expressed, transmitted, and then it enters the mind of another person. So it could be a joke, it could be a song, it could be a story, it could be a belief, it could be a scientific theory, it could be lots of different things.
What I was saying before, why I think it's a hypothetical unit, because it's an answer to a question: what would be the cultural equivalent of a gene? And basically, it's we have genes, but we have also culture. So what is the gene of a culture? Let's call it a meme. Yes, but then let's find it. Yes, so it's kind of like a logic of the conceptualization of this unit.
But it's also sorry, the people do not need to know what the unit is to make intelligent reasonings about means. That's one of the misunderstandings. people have been speaking about genes long before they had any idea of how DNA functions. And even now, there is not a clear definition of a gene because it's a structure of DNA, but where does it begin, where does it end? For some cases, when it's a set of DNA codes for a particular protein, it's obvious, but there are all kinds of sections of DNA that don't seem to code, but still they are genes. But how
so it's
are
also
they
hypothetical in medicine.
The main point is it's an evolutionary approach. That means you consider variation and you consider selection. That means there are variants, and some of those are better at spelling, and some of them are worse at spelling. Now, if you are able to distinguish between two variants and characterize the better one in some way, then you can use it to make predictions, like saying the one that is a better mean, that means that it's better at spelling, will spread faster. And that's, I think, what you're also trying to say with your viruses. If you know things like the percentage of people who will get infected after they have been subjected to a particular virus, you can start making predictions about how quickly the virus will spread. The same with a meme. If you can make certain predictions about this meme will do better than that meme, suppose that there are two versions of a joke, you could maybe, on the basis of characteristics of these two versions, say this joke will spread more than the other one, and after a while, the one that spreads more will suppress the one that's less good, and people will forget the less good variant.
But isn't like Dawkins kind of out of date? Because he first wrote the thing in the selfish gene, right? So he was, which is this kind of reductionist view, right? So he's kind of bringing everything down to like genes reproducing themselves.
Dawkins has always been accused to be the worst reductionist possible, but that's not the case.
Well, with the selfish gene, though, that argument that genes are the important deciders of fate, and we are carriers of genes, and the genes just want to propagate themselves. It's sort of, first, it's a misattribution of agency. And it did lead to this giant conceptual mistake, because unlike how Francis talks about the meme, which is very clear, you have hyper objects, like the Catholic Church is now considered a meme by people who do memetics. Well, how is this the same as looking at two different versions of a joke? It's not the same. And how is it the same as a gene? Is the Catholic Church a gene?
It's the same in the sense that people on the internet will say like, you'll say like, it's a thing, right? You'll say like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. What's a thing? A thing is anything that's a thing. Like it's a thing for you and it becomes a thing for others. And suddenly everyone's talking about this thing and thinking in terms of this thing. And then it's a thing. So it's like Francis says, it doesn't have to have a definition other than people are thinking in terms of it.
I mean, people have always misunderstood Dawkins since they remember just this one message that you just say. But if you read Dawkins more carefully, what he says is genes collaborate, they form complexes where one gene depends on the presence of another gene. So some genes will propagate well together, but not well together with others. And then genes lead to bodies, phenotypes, which themselves interact with environments, which produce extended genotypes. And it's those extended genotypes that eventually determine which genes will propagate. So the view of Dawkins is quite a bit more complex and more subtle than people have presented.
That's true.
What Dawkins has been doing well is reminding people that there are something like selfish genes, that means genes that propagate not because they are good for the organism, but because they are good at replicating. And these genes do exist and they do explain quite a lot of things in biology.
Okay, I mean, I haven't read Dawkins in so much depth, I can't comment. I do think he leads himself open to this argument of being reductionist by saying, and talking about selfish genes and saying things like monkeys are machines which carry genes in trees.
It's a little bit strongly to make people think, but yeah.
And it's interesting to me, he doesn't spend a lot of time talking about memes anymore. It's really gone off, and his sort of followers or successors talk a lot and try very hard. I mean, it was a very powerful way to make people confront how evolution is everywhere. And the genes aren't just it's not only genes that are good for us that propagate. There's a process that, as with viruses, they propagate because they succeed. It's tautological, but it's reality. But he doesn't seem so interested in it anymore. And his whole debating style probably isn't helpful. But for. But I don't think the idea's going to survive much longer because the grumpy cats are winning, I think.
But going back to Catholicism, we're not speaking about the Catholic Church, which is a social organization. Let's speak about Catholicism or any kind of a religion. What Dawkins or a Mathesist would say, it's a meme complex. It means it's a collection of memes that tends to replicate together because they help each other. It's the same with genes. Genes typically do not individually replicate, they replicate as part of a genome. That means that they form a whole, which as a whole is good at surviving. And in Catholicism, there are a number of individual memes which they share with other religions, like for example with Protestantism or with Islam or even with Buddhism, some things they share. And the whole is good at replicating itself. And that's why there are hundreds of millions of Catholics in the world. So the whole is a good replicating organism, but you can, if you want, look at individual elements of that. For example, one classic example is virgin births. So virgin birth is something that's accepted by all Christians, that Jesus was born from a virgin. But actually, if you look at the prehistory of Christianity, you see that there are myths about gods that were born from virgins in Roman times and in Persian times and well predating Christianity. So where did that idea came from that Jesus was born from a virgin? Probably because they picked up that myth from somewhere else. Yeah. And it's turned out to replicate well in the context of all the other elements of Catholicism.
But then some of these elements, like the hierarchy of the church, and that if you pay the church money, you go to heaven, you see real human agency suddenly appears, and the church is propagating itself through agency. And if you describe this as part of a mimetic process, I think you're doing real violence to understanding what's going on.
Yeah, that's why I say the Catholic Church is not a meme, but Catholicism as a belief is a meme, of which in Dawkins terminology, you might say the Catholic Church as an organization is the phenotype, while the other is the memotype.
Yes, well, I'm looking for the body of Christ in all this, because the genes exist in bodies, and see, I just find too many elisions, and that's why I don't use it.
But if you have genes existing in bodies, then is it fair to say that you can't have a body that consists entirely of viruses?
No.
Sorry, if viruses exist in hosts, then you can't have a host which consists entirely of viruses, right?
Right.
So viruses can't be, I mean, of course, I'm saying something dumb, but viruses can't be the only metaphor in town, right? You have to have the metaphor of virus, but then you also have the metaphor
Of an
beings
organism.
or an organism or so on. Like we can't explain therefore everything in terms of viruses.
No, not at all. I would run screaming from that idea. But we have to think in new ways, and we often need new language to think of new ways. Like the things I'm worried about: exponential growth, percentages, the way things spread faster, the way the virals are opposite of how humans work in terms of feedback processes, as Marta was saying. So that's just it's trying to get people to do the hard work. When we go to school, like all of us went to school or going to school all the time, learning from our students, we learn things that are new, and sometimes they're counterintuitive. And yet, and this is what science does a lot. Well, quantum mechanics is full of counterintuitive discoveries. And so we have to think in new ways. We cannot think about quantum processes in just what seems natural in the physics of our lived world. And no more can we think of this viral infested world that we live in now without thinking in hard, counterintuitive ways.
I don't know if I can just pop in real quick. One of the things that I think is important in this kind of discussion is maybe thinking about how embodiment happens, because in a particular gene, there is a sense of embodiment where it happens in a person, and it's kind of carried down. But I mean, how exactly does that embodiment translate to a cultural space? What exactly? There's a process of accepting a meme, but how can you discuss this notion of embodiment on a cultural?
Well, I didn't put embodiment down as part of the viral vocabulary because host seems to work better. I mean, although a computer, you can think of it as being embodied. Once when I first met the man who coined the term cyborg, Manfred Kleins, I only met him first virtually, and I sent him a message, and it had a very benign computer virus on it. And so he called me up and he yelling at me in his Australian English accent, because he had a complicated life. You've infected me, you've infected me. He felt his computer, which had this very benign virus, it did nothing, but it did come up on the virus software that I directly infected him. And of course, a digital virus does exist in hardware and in software. It may move around fast, but you can track it down and end it if you're lucky. It depends. And the culture virus, exists within a culture, within people, sometimes in individual minds and between them. I mean, Catholic Church isn't just in people's minds, it's in all, like a discourse system. It's in the rituals, it's in the paraphernalia, it's in the churches. You can understand a lot about Catholicism, not by the official story, but why are there more churches dedicated to Mary than anyone else? How come God and Jesus and the Holy Ghost have so few churches, and yet Mary has so many? Well, feminists argue it's because to have a balanced religion, you need the feminine principle. And even though Catholicism is officially patriarchal, on the grassroots, when people are choosing who to dedicate their church to, when the church is seeking to embed itself in people's social lives, the feminine is emphasized, as it is in many, many cultures. Mexico, Poland, you do not have Catholicism without Mother Mary, right? Who's actually, of course, you're getting back to a pagan balance between matriarchal and patriarchal, or feminine and masculine forces. So embodiment is very important for me philosophically as a feminist and an activist. But viruses, the body that's being infected with viruses becomes more metaphorical that you get further from the biological virus.
Yeah, I guess post kind of.
It works better. I mean, you're going to have to talk about like computer systems as having a type of embodiment, which I don't know helps us understand how they work and how to fix them or how to protect them. I mean, if it does, I'll have to think about it, but I don't see how it does. And embodiment of culture too. I don't see how that helps either, understanding its spread. So.
Can I answer something? Usually with viruses, we know that they have to be like, if they are extremely dangerous and they kill their hosts, they kind of harm themselves, they will be stopped. So actually the viruses that survive usually get milder and milder.
Well,
because otherwise, I mean, you kill those that help you survive, you die yourself.
But they've studied this, and actually many epidemiologists believe this. But it turns out that viruses that infect people and don't kill them but produce immunity are just no more successful or less successful than viruses that infect someone and kills them, but before symptoms appear, it's still infectious. And the deadly viruses can also spread too. So it's not built in that viruses will become more benign. We have seen COVID become more benign. Omicron is more successful at attacking lung tissue when it gets into people's bodies, not as deeply, which apparently is one of the more deadly aspects of the Delta and Alpha variants. But it doesn't mean like a type of Ebola that spreads, that's infectious, people infectious before symptoms appear, could not spread throughout the world and kill half of humanity. I mean, that's still very possible. We can't count on that. It's a dynamic, but it has its limits.
Well, actually, my question was starting with that, but the point was with social viruses. Viewed from that point of view, is there a way, have you thought of a system to evaluate which of those social viruses and how could that be done? I mean, I don't claim that I know how, but how would you, like what Francis said about the meme, you can look at the meme and more or less know that if it has this, and this, it will be propagated. But it would be very interesting for a social virus, particularly what you say about social viruses being spread to social media And you seem to consider that a big danger for all that I understand, if not.
Well, if the social media is designed around the profit like it currently is and being sticky, and if it's also being directly manipulated by certain actors like, all the different security services. But like take Nazism. Now, Nazism, if you could think of as a viral infection, and when you look at how it spread through Germany and became dominant, but then it reached a point where it was deadly, and with 10% of the Germans dying, it was eradicated. But what if Hitler, instead of like spreading out his options and putting some effort into developing atomic bombs, but he also sent submarines to the North Pole to look for the ice dwarves, because they might have had great weapons. Now, what if they had been a little more focused or a little more successful and they got the atomic bomb first? You can easily imagine, as in this The Man in the High Castle series, which I recommend people watch, that the Nazis could have won out. But then The Man in the High Castle, well, they used some science fiction to like save the day, but also many Nazis became very dubious about Nazism. So maybe in the long run, things would turn out better, but maybe we would have had a 1,000-year Reich. So I'm not sure there's any built-in safety. The thing to notice, lies with viruses. Like I said early on, there's lots of viruses that impact us, and viruses have changed how genes work, and viruses are crucial for life working and so on. So the thing isn't to say virus is bad, non-virus is good. It's how does this particular virus impact the hosts? And since we are the hosts that we're most concerned about, and our computer systems and our cultures, then that's the thing to look at. Now, it's not hard if you can step back. That's the hard part. And look at Nazism and fascist viewpoints to see this is not really healthy. You can look back with science and step back, not back in time, and look at the carbon economy of neoliberal pseudo-capitalism, that's the dominant political economic organization, and say this is killing the world. All the whether it's done at the behest of Chinese storytelling to themselves that they are still communists by some magic, or kleptocrats like Putin and the Saudi Arabian princes, the killer prince, or it's the more official neoliberal capitalism of Europe and North America. It's what they're all killing the world in the same ways, through the hyper extraction of process, the elitism and so on. So you can just say that's kind of viral, that's dangerous. And you can draw on science. You don't have to pretend science is perfect, that's a mistake. But you could say science is a good system for correcting its own errors. And let's ask science, and also let's ask art, and let's ask, culture. What do you think of this? And then try to work from those answers using prefiguration. Is this really the world you want? Where Jews are hunted down and killed, how many people are hunted down and killed? I mean, that was the Nazi world. And when you read people, how they fell into that world and accepted it, a majority of Germans accepted it and went along with it, you can just see how dangerous it is. This is why I think, not just virus, we need to work hard to think in hard, new, difficult ways and not just accept the old languages.
So do you think about that as, okay, but would you think about your talk now, for example, as a virus? And so like what are we talking about finding like inoculations for dangerous info viruses? Or are we also thinking in terms of like creating our own viruses that could spread good stories?
Yes, for both of them.
We can create informational viruses that can create their own inoculations in the host, or like what are the positive stories that we can read from viruses?
Well, I'm part of a collective called Q Remedy that's been looking at ways to find approaches to help people escape from the believing in QAnon and believing in certain kind of closed conspiracy cults where the Democrats are harvesting the adrenal glands of little children and so on and so forth. And they've discovered, well, not us, but we draw on the research, and research shows that if you inoculate people with, a certain set of logics and facts beforehand, they're much less likely to fall into these. But also, we know that like QAnon in particular is a lot like an augmented reality game. So one of the things our group is trying to do is raise money so we can have a game contest where people can play a different game. Right? And in fact, when you look at human behavior, and we saw this in the Systems at Play conference, humans want to play games. And you can have games that are more liberatory, that open them up to the realization that there aren't simple answers to complex questions, or you can have games that are much more closed. And the kind of games you play actually shapes who you are to some extent. So yeah, all of what you said was true. And just thinking of viruses and language opens up some of these doors. You can apply from one domain to another, like inoculation. They actually call it, some of the people working on giving people who are susceptible to these ideas, inoculation. And the way they try to spread, it turns out the single best way to counter recruit people from QAnon and from being incels is to get people who are like them, become their friends, have close contact, and in a way infect them with a different point of view, right? Just as you would catch a virus by who you're next to, who you spend time with. Because a lot of these people spend time with no one, or who they spend time with is these people who have these scared, hateful ideas. So you have to expose them to different types of ideas. So all of these, and that metaphors come from the big analogy that virus is a language. So yeah, that's very true. But it's also, we have to understand it's a matter of percentages. It's hard work. You're not going to stomp out all the viruses that are bad for people. But some viruses are good. And that too comes out. I'm glad you said, spread good viruses. Because in all this talk about SARS-CoV-2 and COVID, the disease, you pretty much had the vilification of viruses. And if you're going to speak virus as a language, you have to understand that viruses are they are crucial for life. So we need viral phenomena. As we've needed the spread of feminism, the first and second and waves of feminism spread around the world incredibly quickly. It's very good news. There's good news in this as well as bad news. Does somebody from the virtual world want to talk?
Yeah, just raise your hand. If I can jump into what you are saying. And to your question, Ryan, because you ask, okay, what you are saying now, is it a virus and so on? And I very much like this framing that you gave, that, this is a language we actually need to learn, which means that it's like not necessarily the language we speak, yes? So that it's not necessarily that just, by speaking and being a part of the culture and, using words, that we already are in this viral logic. So if you ask a question, okay, can we counterbalance, bad viruses with something good? Exactly, this is where this language, learning the language comes in, okay? Because, for example, if you just speak this self-closing language, yes, this is what religions have been doing all along, yeah. So you have this, let's love each other and hug and be good, and then what you create, you close it and you say, you belong with us, you don't belong there, you either in or out, yes. You are learning from me, okay, we have this nice club, and this is this identity forming thing, yes. So for example, learn having a good meme or good vibe to spread, and actually learning the virus as a language would be just give it to them and set them free, and not bound them to being a club and being, a membership thing, or, differentiating us and them and so on and so on. So that would be in this positive sense, learning the viral dynamics, then just, give understandings and, let people do whatever they want with it.
Exactly, and not use it.
Yeah.
Because some languages or discourse systems are used as a form of control.
Yeah.
When you learn, I was a construction worker for many years. And if you didn't know the right thing to call the different kinds of hammers and nails, then, people look down on you and you couldn't get work as much. And you might have been very skilled at doing the work, but you didn't have the language. And we see this in academia too. Yeah. And one of the best examples came from one of my professors in history of consciousness, Barbara Epstein. And she was the University of California professor. And so when Reagan was elected president, she went to interview Paul Nitze, who was his national security advisor, very powerful man. So she's lit in, and he offers her tea in the China cup because he went to Yale or something, he's American aristocrat. We do have them. And so they're talking, and Barbara's asking him questions about Russia and stuff. And then she says, blah, 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 disarmament. And he looks at her, this 70-year-old patrician upper class, and he says, get out. Says, get out. She goes, what? What? She goes, get out. I'm not talking to you. Why could she use that one word? Disarm the men. You could talk about arms reduction in the military industrial complex. You could talk about arms control. But if you say disarm the men, it was like to him saying, I want to cut off your arms and have you be a cripple. I mean, he's a very smart man. He could not bear to hear that term. You are not allowed to say certain things within the military discourse. And that's because it's a closed language.
Yeah.
And you're right, a virus is going to be a helpful language. It has to be the opposite of that. It has to be open. In some ways, it has to be more like a real language. There's attempts to police language all the time. We see the French Academy does. The Spanish had the first official Spanish. And Catalonia now, there's all sorts of attempts to force people to speak Catalan. And often in sort of weird ways. When I was in Tarragona, it turns out that Catalans have a law that if you in your shop, you put anything in Spanish, you must put 4 times as much in Catalan, right? So it's 80-20, but it says nothing about English. So in fact, many shopkeepers are putting more English in their shops because they just can't, they don't want to put 80% Catalan and 20% Spanish only. So they now have maybe 25% English, and then for the rest is divided up between Catalan and Spanish. And they put in some German too. The law doesn't differentiate for that. So it attempts to control language. Languages have to be living things.
Yeah.
And they have to be open systems. So yeah, that's a very good, very good point. Yeah.
Your friend wants to ask a question.
I have a friend.
Jihan?
Well, Jihan, oh, she did. We'll call her.
Yeah. Jihan?
Yeah, hello. Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot, Chris, for this wonderful presentation. And I do very much enjoy the discussions. It's I wish if we stay like hours. I just stop in front of one term you said. It's good viruses encounter two, we can say, bad viruses. Who would say this is bad virus or good viruses? Why are talking about the dynamic of spreading the virus, or let's say in the culture arena, ideas with extremist group. If someone from ISIS is sitting just exactly in your seat, he would say the opposite. He would believe that what are you saying is totally bad virus, and the good virus is what he's saying. So who's judging what? This is one point. The second point is, like the biological virus, there is a process started from getting the infection or getting infected, and there is a long process, and then we are totally infected. So how can we apply that to the culture virus, especially? This is what I'm thinking about it right now. Thank you so much.
Well, the first part is very hard because you need criteria.
This is the point. This is the problem, exactly.
But notice, you can notice some of the things that the ISIS people build up. They have an assumption that they have absolute truth, and that working towards
all
that absolute
right wing, all of them, all the right wing were all of
exactly.
them, all the extremists, yeah.
One of the criteria I think we need to apply is epistemology. If you are convinced that you have a system that explains everything, then you're wrong. And so any closed epistemology, whether it's Marxist-Leninism or whether it's ISIL or whether it's some scientists who can't accept new findings because their old findings are contradicted by it, then that is the problem. That's what makes science powerful, because it's an open epistemology, because it's always assuming that on the more complex questions, it's sort of wrong. It can be more right. And it's the same politically. So you need criteria. And also you can apply prefiguration and just ask most people, what society do you want to live in? I made an argument in my last book, before this one, the last book I wrote, Peace, War, and Computers, that there was a limit to how far fundamentalist Islam could spread, because it fundamentally argued that women were inferior and should not have a role in society. So right off the hand, you're taking half the population and disempowering them. Not that some women don't support these things. I've never talked to you about this. Maybe this is a totally stupid argument. You would know way more than me. But it seems to me that being patriarchal is a limit, just like the Republicans are finding by being patriarchal, by banning abortion, by oppressing people who have different sexuality. They're just taking a lot of people who might be allies and saying, no, you are the enemy. And so that is something to notice too, with some ways of thinking about the world. Now, of course, it's we as humans, we're doing the deciding. And so from a longer term point of view, maybe we shouldn't be so upset by the whole world going to hell. Because like my brother once was saying, when I said, oh, look, civilization could collapse, our children, my nephews and his nephews, you know, they might not get to live out their whole life. And he goes, well, you know, who cares? The hard thing was getting life. Life started. That took 1 billion years. Now we have life. Something better might come. I'm rooting for the Dolphins. He's a big fan of the Dolphins. So, you know, I go, I'm really attached to my nephews and my sons. But he's sort of like Zen. It's like, so maybe we aren't the best measure of, but for me, I think humans can do better. So I think that's one of the criteria. Yeah. Now, actually, the point you made, I think was really great too, because we don't just have, you're not just infected or not infected. You can be infected and not be symptomatic. You can be infected.
Exactly.
You know, you could get long COVID. Yeah. You could get long COVID. And this happens culturally too. You know, a lot of people just get a little fascist. They're just a little infected with fascism. They aren't totally infected, but they're infected enough maybe to spread the idea. Some are asymptomatic. They're only doing it for the laughs. I mean, a lot of the most evil memes that are spread online are being spread by young people who are just really bored out of their brains. And they just think, oh, this is funny. You know, it's just... And yet, so you could be asymptomatic and spread horrible ideas, right? So yeah, that's an excellent point. I have to put that in my book too. My book lacks subtlety on some of these issues. Love your feedback point too.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Well, I'm interested in the concrete examples of these bad memes, and particularly the conspiracy theories and things like QAnon. Do you have concrete observations of those? Have you studied those?
Oh, yes, very much. And there's a wonderful book that analyzes all the conspiracy theories that came out of the pandemic. And it does something that, in fact, a lot of people who write about conspiracy theories don't do. The first thing when you talk about conspiracy theories is you have to admit that a lot of conspiracy theories are true. And yet you get people using, I don't know if it's the same in Flemish and French and other languages, it is in Spanish, that people say conspiracy theory and you go, oh yeah, that's crazy thinking. But of course, for most of us, anyone who's paying attention, the world is run by conspiracies. Some of them are very obvious, the 1%, and some are very secret. I'm an anarchist revolutionary, so I'm part of at least one big conspiracy, maybe a bunch of little ones, and certainly for certain actions. So you gotta not just say all conspiracies are bad, just like all viruses are bad. And then what the people who analyzed all these conspiracies out of COVID pointed out too, and also there's a great book that looks at the viral underclass too. It's not called that. Actually, it is called that, viral underclass. It's a Black activist who's gay, and he looks at activism. He points out that a lot of people have real legitimate reasons for being angry. You know, the people who supported Trump, many of them are just jerks. But many of them are really poorly served by how society is organized. The parts of America where a lot of white working class people lost their homes, the banking crisis in 2008, the exact counties with a certain percentage of homes lost, because President Obama decided that it would be a moral hazard to give money to working people to keep their houses. But somehow it's not a moral hazard to give money to bankers to keep their banks. That's a very interesting distinction. Every one of those counties in Appalachia, and we're talking Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and so on, they voted for Obama, voted for Trump, right? And they were fucked over by Obama and the bankers, and so they were mad. And so when Trump came along, for all the misogynist and other things he did, he was mad too. And they resonated with him because people are, deeply, much more irrational. They aren't logical about their political choices in many cases too. So it's first understanding that conspiracies are real and that they're happening all the time. And then that some conspiracies, they just don't follow any kind of logic. There's actually rules. How big is the conspiracy? People study conspiracy, and they found ways, this is an inoculation, like Ryan was asking about, if you give people this tool, that a conspiracy that involves keeping a secret, if it has tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, you really can't keep that secret. If it's true, the Democrats in tunnels under the United States are keeping thousands of children hostage so that their adrenal glands can be harvested, so Hillary Clinton can be immortal. Well, then how many people must be involved in that conspiracy? How many? And it's just way too many, right? I apply this when I do my own conspiracy thinking. President Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. Most Americans believe that. Most of the Kennedys believe that. Most of the people in Congress believe it. But still in the mainstream media, it's put down as a crazy conspiracy theory, right? Now, 9/11 was filled with explosives, and when the planes hit, they set off the explosives. That involves too many people. There's just not evidence that happened. It's pretty good evidence that Mossad and parts of the US security establishment knew there was going to be attack. But even Al-Qaeda was surprised when the buildings fell down. We know the buildings fell down because they had a design that was illegal in New York, but because it was on the Port Authority land, the guy who built the buildings could set the building up, and so every floor just hung on the outside walls. There was no internal support. So once one floor fell, they all fell. You can actually I had my brother, a physicist, examine the rate of the fall. I mean, you go into the weeds and you see, what does physics say? What does human psychology say? It's how many people can keep a secret. And you can show that some conspiracies are just not possible. Was Queen Elizabeth a lizard alien from another planet? Millions of people believe this is true. And apparently King Charles, who looks a little bit more like an alien, maybe he is too. But really, how many lizard aliens could there be? And so that helps. But a small conspiracy, I mean, but often, it's right out in front of you. Anyone who wants to understand Nazism should read Mein Kampf. Anyone who wants to understand Stalinism should read Lenin and Rosa Luxemburg critiquing Lenin, and Emma Goldman and other people critiquing, and Bakunin critiquing Marxism. And you could see people said, this is what will happen. And predictions are made and results come out. Sometimes that's a little late, but there are things to do. And it's like this book, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's in my bibliography. It's just brilliant for looking at how these things spread and why people, and it's good to notice why conspiracies are so important to people. Identity, does it feed you your sense of who you are? This is a lot of people adhering to Trump and QAnon. QAnon, because it's a new type of conspiracy that's like an augmented reality game. And this insight comes from augmented reality game designers. They were the first to start writing articles in Wired magazine and other technically oriented journals going, this is just like an augmented reality game. This is what we try to get people to do. All these different tricks that make QAnon spread, the illusion that you're discovering new information, that's how it works. And knowing that, is a way of understanding, what draws people in and how dangerous it can be and why people can fool themselves because they think they're learning themselves because they find it on the internet. And you notice technology washes away a lot of problems. Studies have shown that belief in Hitler was really multiplied by the radio. They also believe in FDR. And actually, even in the massacres in Rwanda between the Hutu and the Tutsi, those were driven by radio. There's been massacres more recently driven by Facebook in Cambodia and so on. Television really freaked people out. And a lot of people believe it's on television. I had friends during the Yugoslavian war, and they were saying, yeah, well, the radio, then the television. They said, my parents saw on television that the Croatians were murdering Serbs. They said it right on television. They go, how could this not be true? It was on television, And that's, of course, something to notice, how people are susceptible to new technologies. And we're getting new technologies all the time. And so there's new susceptibilities, new ways of spreading.
So how does I'm curious about that thing you just mentioned about games and conspiracy theories and getting people to believe that they're discovering stuff for themselves, right? As being a really powerful driver in getting them kind of involved in keeping going through the thing. And I guess you can sort of see that in some kinds of education, right? That you
The Socratic method.
right? But isn't there maybe something to be, isn't this maybe then a case that we kind of shouldn't like overdo it somehow, you know, with like science and so on, in terms of like making things too clear for people, you know, like we tend to like make it all super clear and write nice papers and tie it all together with a bow. And isn't there something for actually just kind of mixing it up and adding a certain amount of noise to papers that actually
I think there's enough noise.
No, I'm curious about that though, and like how that relates to viruses, like, and how you can like utilize that idea.
Well, and the kind of organizing I do as an anarchist and a feminist, we're trying to get large numbers of people to collectively make decisions about how to do stuff. Then you start with a great deal of openness. You know, why are we here? First, you talk personally. Coming from feminism, the personal is political, and if people are unhappy, they're sharing their anxiety. And so then you say, well, what is the problem that we can have a solution for? So actually our act, and then how will we best communicate to the rest of the culture, either locally, like if you're trying to stop a nuclear power plant in San Luis Obispo, or writ large, what are you trying to communicate? And too many activists don't ask these questions. They go and block roads that working people use. Right, the rich people, they don't have to go to work when they need, and instead of going to an oil headquarters, right, they don't notice that, like in this organization in San Luis Obispo, the local people wanted to take the most militant action because their nuke was right there, built actually right on an earthquake fault in California. I mean, you can find places in California without earthquake faults, but it made more sense economically for them to build this nuke right on the Hables Gray fault. I mean, not next to it, on it. So the local people went through by that. And then their allies became, the crazy people who were anarchist feminists like myself, while many other people in the state were going, oh, that's too radical and so on. So it was open. It's an open process. There's no yes or no answers. So that, I think in politics, I see this happening, that we create like a game. And actually, like Emma Goldman said, if I can't dance, I don't want to be in your revolution. So for us, it is always fun. It is always a game. Still too many meetings, but there's ways to make meetings better. Like in South Africa, where you have meetings, even giant world congresses of sociologists, where every hour the South Africans made us get up and sing songs. Now, some of these people from Europe especially were like, what the? I don't look at Dutch and Germans and Norwegians get up and sing songs, but they got up because everyone else was. And the people from, the Mediterranean countries, from India, from South America, joined the South Africans gladly to sing. And then, you know what? Everyone felt better after they sang, right? Because it was more like a game. So the academia as a game. That's why you always need great parties. As an organizer, if I'm in a movement that doesn't have good parties or great parties, then I'm like, oh, there's a problem with this. There's something not right. That's why it was good. The systems of play had a pretty good party at the end. Otherwise, it would have dropped in my estimation. But instead, the party came through. So you got to gamify your life. I mean, life should be full of pleasure, homo ludens. And yet the right wing has found this more. They have a good time making the liberals, I want to bathe in liberals' tears. They have great, hilarious T-shirts. They often say things just to freak liberals out. And they're getting a lot of pleasure. That's why Trump, people go, how can you like Trump? Well, he's an amazingly clever clown. And so he amuses them. They don't believe what he says. They don't even trust him so much, but he's been very amusing. I think people totally underestimate how attractive his amusing capabilities are. Now they're getting bored with him. It's a good thing. So he's less amusing. So we have to be aware of these dynamics. And see, again, your group has not ignored this reality, actually. I mean, systems of play was all about trying to harness that power, right? Which I think it's a fundamental power in human culture. people are not happy, they are not going to participate well in the culture, right? Even the Nazis had incredible spectacle, good music, all that marching in unison. I mean, there was a dark side to it. I don't think they danced very well, but that's not a German thing anyway. So they did definitely meet a lot of the desires people had. One of the big attractions of war, as John J. Glenn writes in his book, The Warriors, is war is an incredible spectacle. I mean, and then there's the bonding. You have intense bonding. This is what you get in all movements, left to right, intense bonding under danger, and so on. That's also part of it.
I don't know. Is that supposed to say she hasn't
Jeff, I see a comment in the chat box from you. Do you want to comment? Maybe say something? Oh, no. No. Or anybody else?
Maybe his mic is not working.
Yeah, it is. There's somebody.
Unclear.
Jeff, are you going to speak? No. No, I think it's just a background noise. So, anybody?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say real quick, one of the things that's kind of been swirling around in my mind throughout the talk, the importance of like how discourses are shaped, and we brought this up like a few times, but I think you could probably like it might be easy to identify like a few like logics of discourse. And one of the ones that we mentioned before is like assuming you're always right, which is like very common, especially that's like that's not a very good logic to have. Also like placing blame on people. I think there are like a few things, like a few logics that might be pointed out within discourse. Because I think like one of the biggest problems here is just like the ability to have conversations in the first place. On like certain levels, it's not really happening. It's not even like capable of happening really. Because of these logics to some degree.
And another important thing to notice, I'm glad your comment made me remember something pretty important, is how a lot of the discourse rules aren't formal. They aren't really logical. My friend Sharon Trawick, who went to History of Consciousness, she studies the culture of physicists. So she did all this field work with American physicists. But then to get a good, and being much harder at working academic than I am, to get a good balance, she decided to learn Japanese, go to Japan and study Japanese physicists. Well, her work on American physicists showed that all sorts of unscientific criteria were really important for how well people succeeded, how much time people spent in the bars, whether they knew the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars, the kind of jokes they told, that this was whether they were flamboyantly presented themselves as not straight, but rather gay, whether they were men or women, right? So she in particular focused in on women success in high energy physics. High energy physics, not theoretical physics, where one person can just do theory and then people try to see if it's provable or not. But high energy physics involves putting together massive groups of people to work together. Yourself, the leader of the team, and then a few other maybe well-known physicists, and then postdocs and doctoral students doing their research on this little apparatus, part of the big project. So you're putting together a big team. So she asked the American physicists, why aren't there women leading any of these big physics projects? And they said, well, women aren't aggressive enough. They don't go out there and establish they're the alpha, and that then they get everyone in line and they formulate a vision and everyone has to follow it and so on. She goes, okay. So then she goes to Japan and she asks the Japanese why the women aren't leading any of the big Japanese research projects. And they go, well, the women are just too aggressive. They try to take over. They got to learn to cooperate like the men do. And this is the Japanese way. It's the exact opposite story. I mean, it's hilarious. But the rule really is, the meta rule is that men are in charge. Now, actually, some of the Japanese women go to Switzerland and have had some success. They can't come to the States because they're too Japanese and quiet and unaggressive enough. But now this is changing. We were talking before this presentation at lunch. There is changes in science pushed by all sorts of people women especially, but men as well, who do science studies and scientists in these realms. And work like Sharon's is very important because the interesting thing is all the physicists really read that book because she knew all these physicists at SLAC and at CERN and at the major centers in Japan and in Europe because she did field work with them. So this is what you see a real power in anthropology and sociology and even in science studies. When I wrote my book, Postmodern War, it was read by reviewers for every major military journal in the United States. And they all hated it except the Marines, who used to like this high technology. It's since succumbed to the allure of the silver bullet. But it was also taken up by the Israeli military and was required reading for the Israeli military for almost 10 years. Everyone who wanted to be a colonel or higher in the Israeli military had to read my book because it was very critical of how much war could solve problems. And Shimon Neva, very, very impressive man who ran the Staff Command College before he was purged, felt that Israel was thinking too much on military solving their problems. And his wife taught feminist studies at Tel Aviv University. And so he was trying very hard to get Israel to rethink how their military works. And obviously my book didn't help. Things got much worse there. And the Chinese stole my book and without paying me a cent, translated into Chinese, and so did the Persians. But then Turkish radicals paid a nominal sum, and now it's been translated into Turkish too. So, you know, how people use these things makes a big difference. And in fact, what Sharon does, like by revealing the secret codes of how physics used to work, how they keep women out of physics and gay people out of physics, you know, it's very important kind of work. And we see change happening. I should try to be more optimistic in these realms and just say, there's a lot of reason for hope. Once my youngest son, because I was talking about immortality research, and I said, oh, they're making great progress in immortality research. I said, you know, there's a good chance, you know, there's some chance that you might live to be hundreds of years old because I think they are making breakthroughs. And he goes, oh, do you feel bad, Dad? And I go, nah, because there's a 50% chance that you'll be dead before you're 40 and the whole civilization will collapse. Thanks, Dad. But yeah, it could go either way. Like I told the Dutch students, thanks to the prompting of that Syrian refugee, now we don't have a choice. So that's nice news. We can worry about other stuff.
I was just thinking, now that you thought of aesthetics and in Nazism and so I was thinking maybe there should be an aesthetic element that would add to the attractiveness of a virus. So that's one thing that you can manipulate. It's a little bit, let's say, if we are talking of a language, it might be compared to poetry, you might say, because sometimes when you read poetry, you say, well, these are beautiful, not even poetry, it can be prose, but sometimes the words are so beautifully arranged that you are attracted, you don't even think whether it makes sense or not.
Mm-hmm.
There can be beauty to the aesthetics of it. So that might be a way, for example, if you want to propagate a positive virus.
Well, yes, very much so.
Work with also with the aesthetics of it, like, yeah, because poetry, for example, is something that you kind of learn by heart. It's out there, you have the, how would I say, not the tradition necessarily, but the habit of thinking of poetry is something you learn, and then it comes up at moments that are associated with what's in there. If you manage to manipulate a virus and dress it in such a beautiful way and dress it in a uniform like in the High Castle, because aesthetically, in the Man in the High Castle, if you looked at the Nazis there and the uniforms,
Yeah, very strong. Yeah.
The aesthetics were
But in a Butch kind of way. Well, you see this in the socially responsible gaming movement. My university, where I mainly taught for many years, the University of California at Santa Cruz, their whole gaming department does socially conscious games. And the first thing they realized was, you got to make the game fun. It's got to be beautiful. It's got to have a good aesthetic, right? It doesn't have to be beautiful per se. I mean, look at how South Park captured the hearts and minds of so many people. And I always found it so ugly. I couldn't enjoy the good parts. But for other people, other generations, it was exactly what they wanted to see. So that aestheticness is crucial, style or whatever. And the Nazis had a certain kind of style that appealed to certain people. And that's so true. I'm the person I am, not so much because of poetry, but because of novels. Novels I read changed my life. And it's harder to write a great novel than I think a very, very good nonfiction book. It's been my experience at least.
Also, it's often music that brings, like, like you have cultural evolutions, you have new type of music, like hippie.
Oh, yes, and even Beethoven and
Yeah.
and the whole end of aristocracy. And Beethoven was considered so radical, and he was a big supporter of overthrowing the old order, the old regimes. Yeah, very true. Music is crucial.
And like it's very interesting how the worldview is, like how does it happen that it comes with music? Yes, that you listen to this music and you start like, okay, you're kind of like tuning into a new worldview. Yes, and
Do you have any style advice for Claire?
Let's speak fashion.
Style advice, like,
And no, it's not my realm. My advice is just get stronger. We need more interdisciplinary scholarship. We need to keep it in the academy and subvert the academy from their disciplines. The mania. See, this is where you see the discourse rules. What makes the academy? We see two forces. The first force is the worst. It's the bureaucrats and middle management. More and more of the resources everywhere in the world in education on all levels don't go to teaching, they go to the bureaucrats. I have a friend who teaches at a Dutch university, and she has to keep track of her hours. And she officially has to spend, this shows a certain madness, mad honesty. She has to spend more hours in meetings with other bureaucrats and teachers than teaching. They tell her this. You're teaching too much. You need to spend more hours in stupid meetings. And yet we see the bureaucracies perpetuate themselves. And the other problem is, of course, disciplines and how they rate themselves and how the disciplines are corrupted by outside money too, which I see is all sort of related. And you guys are just so resistant to disciplines. It's amazing you thrived here, because I've seen other interdisciplinary projects run into problems, right? Institutionally, because there's just no support for them. Donna Haraway once, when I was a grad student, she got some research money. She said, well, half of it, do what you need to research. So it's researching war, postmodern war. But half of it, she was very curious about the emergence of new disciplines, like psychoneuroimmunology, where you look at psychology, neurology, and the immune system, because there's a lot of evidence that people's psychological states affect their immune system, and they were, the neurology was the middle part. And she was hoping, there'd be evidence that people were establishing in interdisciplinary centers, and they were. But in the interdisciplinary centers, then first thing they started saying was, we're a new discipline. We are the psychoneuroimmunology discipline. So we should be treated just like physics and like psychology and neurology. They did not embrace being interdisciplinary. They, in fact, went the other way. A friend of mine, Thomas Kalmar, who does mathematics education, and strangely enough, just wrote the definitive book on King Alfred of England. But he was at this Cal State Monterey Bay School, which took over a military base near my home in Santa Cruz and created a whole school that was interdisciplinary. It also had service learning. And though what he saw in the first 10 years is the people who came fought like dogs to establish their disciplines. So you had something called communicative arts. But within that, the English faculty met together, the communication, and they plotted on how they would win out and establish their discipline as the real discipline. So he left in disgust, right? So this tendency, this is tribalism in academia. It's almost as dangerous as the bureaucrats, almost. They're the real problem.
Dirk.
Yeah, thank you. We talked a lot about narratives today, and we used the metaphor of virus and memes, and be it positive or in a negative sense. But are there narratives or are there facts that are not so linked to this metaphor of virus or memes where we say, well, this theory or your theory or the theory of memes doesn't apply or almost doesn't apply to it? Could you give some examples?
Well, of course, facts are an interesting concept. It was Niels Bohr who said, you know, the opposite of a fact is something that's not a fact, it's not true. But the opposite of many great truths are often other great truths. So for me, facts are important, but they're so discrete and there's so many of them. You know, it's really a question of which facts are we choosing. Now, virus is a language, as its central idea is, it is not the only language you should speak. Deeply behind this, in my own personal psychology, is my long struggle to become fluent in Spanish, because I love how Spanish makes me feel. I love how it sounds. I love how I think differently in Spanish. That's what I really love about it. I just think differently. It frees me from a lot of the binds that English makes me think in. So when I want people to speak virus as a language, I do not want them not to speak other languages, because many languages do not address these issues. It's just that these certain dynamics right at this point in our stage of civilization are so important. So it says very little about aesthetics. I mean, would there be poetry in virus? I don't think virus as a language will have any great poetry. I mean, you might spread virus or music for that matter. What is the music of the viruses? I just can't imagine it. So it's a profoundly limited language, you know, but nonetheless, I consider it a language. But there must be many languages. It cannot speak to many different things, emotions, that of a rich, complex way. I mean, epistemologically, we notice that viruses are very flawed. They're very simple. Even good viruses, there's this tendency to just do one thing, and then there's expansion. In terms of feedback, they only go in one direction, really, until they collapse. It's not a matter of homeostasis. It's difficult in the viral realm. You know, homeostasis where there's a natural regulation of a complicated, that's what makes a cyborg. There must be unconscious homeostasis, technically, for there to be a cyborg. The viral realms do not have homeostasis. It's wild fluctuations for much of it. Some viruses exist symbiotically in life processes, but we see the viral dynamics of how they propagate through mutation and super success and super failure. It's not really it's not a smooth ride. So yeah, it's a good point. There's many things this language doesn't speak to.
Thank you.
I hope it speaks to some important things.
All right, our time is up. Anybody still wanting? So is it okay to?
Yes,
close?
yes,
Yeah.
I'm complete.
All right.
I'm a bit tired.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. I've got like at least 4 major ideas I have to put in the final draft of the book. So I can memorize them, I'm pretty sure.
So we are closing the official part now, and we go to the bar. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.